Good morning, beautiful people. Grace and peace to you from Jesus. We are talking about a subject that can not strike fear in the hearts of women, but maybe just rile up all kinds of fierce feelings. Biblical womanhood. But not in the sense that this term is often used. We're going to talk about it in a way that actually represents some of the women in the Bible and their strong, beautiful, inspiring stories. I don't want to say very much about the stereotypical use of the word biblical womanhood because I don't think it deserves our time or attention. But I know that it has often been used to do harm to women. And I want to reclaim that phrase today, and maybe in some future videos, because the truth of biblical womanhood is that there are some fierce women in our stories that do amazing things and can inspire us to claim our own power, our own gifts, and to use those to make the world a better place for everyone. So today we're going to talk about two women, Vashti and Queen Esther. Actually, Queen Vashti and Queen Esther. These two women are in the book of Esther. It's a story about the Persian Empire. The Jewish people at the time of the story were ruled by the Persian Empire, and there is a king named King Xerxes who is the king over the Persian Empire, and he has extreme power. And when the story begins, he's married to a woman named Vashti. Now, King Xerxes, in order to celebrate his power, throws a giant party. The story tells us that the party lasted 180 days. I'm pretty sure that they probably had to take some breaks in there. Can anyone really party for 180 days straight? I'm not sure. But what we do know from this description is that it was rich and extravagant, and King Xerxes was able to throw such a party. It also would mean that he was able to not really oversee his nation for those 180 days, which tells us something about the character of this man. So at some point in this party, he decides that he wants to put his wife, Queen Vashti, on display. And he orders her to come wearing her crown and to parade herself in front of King Xerxes' gathered guests. Now, there's something to note about this. The king was throwing this party for men. Queen Vashti threw her own party for the women. So he's asking her to come and parade herself in front of a group of men. It's a complete objectification of her. And she refuses. She says no. Really, this is an act of civil disobedience. It's not just a wife refusing her husband. He is the king and he's giving her an order. It's an act of civil disobedience when she stands up for herself and says, I refuse to allow you to objectify me like this. There are repercussions for her actions. This should not surprise us. We know that when power is denied its opportunity to control, there are often consequences. Some of these are personal consequences to Vashti. She is cast out of the king's sight forever. She's no longer going to be the queen. And some of them actually are consequences for all of the women in the kingdom, because King Xerxes makes a ruling that all women must now obey their husbands. Again, this is not surprising because power does not like to be challenged and often responds by trying to take more control or power. There's another woman in the story, Queen Esther. She follows Vashti, and the book of Esther is named after her. Queen Esther exercises her power and agency in a different way than Vashti. Where Vashti refused to participate in the corrupt system and objectification, Esther uses the gifts that she has, one of which is beauty, to become powerful in her own right. And in doing this, she's also both beautiful and very smart. The story doesn't tell us that she's smart, but we can see in her actions as the story goes on, the ways in which she is able to understand the king and use that understanding to manipulate him in order to save her people. So Esther and Vashti we see as operating in very different ways, but both of them understand their value, claim their agency and their rights, and stand up for themselves and by extension other women and really all people. Esther ends up setting the Jewish people, well, not setting them free, but protecting them from genocide, really. That's what King Xerxes is going to do. He's going to wipe out all the Jewish people, and Esther is able to save her people from that. This is what biblical womanhood looks like. Two strong, powerful women. One who exercises civil disobedience and refuses to participate in the patriarchy and absolute power, and another one who uses the gifts that she has to work within the system to change it and to rescue and redeem her people. Friends, let us not be told the lie that in order to be women of faith, we have to be something we're not. God has given us voice. God has given us agency. God has given us the ability to work either in civil disobedience and not participating in the corrupt society that grabs for power, or to work within it. And there's other examples of biblical womanhood too that we're not going to talk about today. But I want to invite us to hear the stories of these women and to do a couple of things with them. One of them is to think about what systems of power do to people who are marginalized. Vashti and Esther both have to risk quite a bit to advocate for justice, to stand up for themselves and women, and in Esther's case, for her people. Systems of power often make us think that we are helpless. But Esther and Vashti show us that that is not true, that there is risk involved, but that we have agency. The other thing I think that these women might invite us to is ask ourselves the question, what gifts do I have? Where am I called at this moment to be a part of redeeming and liberating oppressed people in this world? We're all going to have different answers. The way Vashti did it was different than the way Esther did it, and that is okay. Sometimes there can be a scarcity mentality when we're looking at oppression or at absolute power or systems of power, where there's a narrative that there is not enough resources, or there's only one right way to push back against the system. And Vashti and Esther tell us a different story. There is abundance. There is a myriad of ways to be involved in bringing about God's justice in the world. And most often, God will call us to use our authentic selves in this work. Not to be somebody we're not to try to be like someone else who did it a particular way, but to really ask, who are we? And what gift has God given us for this moment in time? That is one of the most compelling questions that we can ask, and then listen to God for the answer. Who are we? How are we gifted? And what is God calling us to at this moment in time? And I think Esther and Vashti both show us examples of what it looks like to ask and answer that question and then to follow where God leads. What's so interesting about the book of Esther is that the word God is not mentioned at all in the whole book. And yet this book is read every year in the Jewish celebration of Purim. It is considered a holy text in both the Jewish and the Christian tradition, right? It's in our Bible. And so the word God specifically is not used. And yet the way the book is written, it is written in a way that we can see God's hand at work through all of the events. And so when we talk about both Vashti and Esther in their own ways, embracing their authentic selves, using their gifts, and helping to bring about justice, I think that we can do, without doing harm to the text, attribute God at work through these two women. And maybe that is the best definition of biblical womanhood, right there. Women who allow themselves to be open to God's will, who use their authentic gifts to bring about God's justice one way or another in the world. Isn't that a better definition of biblical womanhood than maybe the one that we've been taught? A woman who is faithful to God, who uses her authentic self to bring about God's justice in the world. That is a definition of biblical womanhood that I can embrace and celebrate. So may Vashti and Esther be our inspirations, not that we copy exactly what they have done, but that they guide us in recognizing our belovedness and the agency that God has given each and every one of us, and that they inspire us to follow God's will in bringing about God's justice in the world. Friends, may you have a blessed day, and may you know yourselves to be beloved children of God. Amen.